Oh, that's gonna sound bad.
Yeah. I'll be there. If they don't give it to me, that's on them. Yeah, no.
You're staring at me for 16 hours. And then whenever that time is up.
They're gonna have to look me in the eye and tell me that they're not giving that to me.
Oh gosh. Cal, I'm gonna need I don't know your password to get into Church Online. I'll get it off my phone.
Kelly, I got here.
If you weren't able to get it, I can.
Yeah, I don't.
Fix.
What I thought it was is not what it is.
That's my stories.
That's awesome. How long is it? Okay. Cool. Okay. That's fine. I wonder, I would be curious to see what yeah. Okay.
Now services go. So.
Okay. That's fine. I just
Okay.
For some reason my phone's not connecting to the thing.
You're not gonna play.
And then Sabrina, you'll be up here. Well, I'm trying, but it's for some reason it won't play. It's like says it's playing the music, but it's not coming through. Hey, Jonathan. Hey, Jonathan.
Yes.
Can you help me? For some reason, the music, it's like playing on the phone, but it's not coming
Playing
through.
through this?
Why does it keep switching? Hold on.
You can go to that. Try now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really weird.
Is that coming through?
And if it won't, that's okay.
It'd be tough.
I know, we like put you up here because I'm like, the sun is just, well, this is a voting location, and so they had to move us out of there for this week, so yeah.
I was wrong. I was like, did you leave this last week?
No. Oh, here's something.
Yeah, it's coming.
Okay.
But not very loud. It's weird.
Yeah. That's okay. Okay, so we're live, right?
Yep. The camera's not on yet.
Oh, it's not on.
Well, it's camera's on. I was hiding it.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Audio's on. Camera's on.
Okay. I'm just wondering, is this going to be too high? Because you can't really see.
I can look over here. You can't see anything.
Oh, okay, but over here you can see. Okay, okay, cool.
Do you want to take a look?
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. Oh, yeah, we're good. Perfect.
You can. It's hard to see.
last week Dan wasn't here, so I had to set up all the tech, and Jonathan helped me, and then we realized that the sound wasn't working for anybody online. I was like, oh, and then I forgot to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, so my 7-year-old tried to FaceTime me like 20 times in a row. Like, right? The guys who were here, you know, it was like, and I was like, oh my gosh, stop trying to FaceTime me. And I wouldn't stop. Oh, and then after church, I was like, hey, bud, what did you need? I couldn't answer because I was in the middle of church. And he goes, oh, I just was going to tell you I'm really bored. And I'm like, clearly that was really urgent for you to call me and tell me you were bored. So, okay, well, I think we're rolling. I think we're good. So, hello, online people. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're just going to start again today with the prayer of examine and just take a few minutes to kind of, center ourselves. So I'm just going to turn this down a little bit. Maybe find. There we go. Okay. All right, so if you want to start, you can take a couple deep breaths if you want to, just to sort of kind of center yourself and maybe put aside the worries of the day or the week or whatever it is. Just kind of try to exist, not like forgetting about them, but just kind of just being fully present in this moment. And the first thing is just to acknowledge an awareness of God's presence. I know sometimes we don't feel God. Sometimes we don't know if God is there. Sometimes we feel really close to God. Whatever that looks like for you right now, just kind of take a second and just no matter what it is, how we feel about the presence of God, maybe take a second to just say, God, no matter what my circumstances are, I'm just going to acknowledge your nearness and acknowledge that you are with me. And then next, I want you to think over the past 24 hours, whatever that looked like, whether you were at work or you had time with family, or maybe you were just relaxing yesterday, or whatever the past 24 hours looked like for you. Let's review that with a posture of gratitude and maybe find even just one thing from the last 24 hours that you can be grateful for, and just take a couple of seconds to reflect on that. And then now I want you to think of an experience over the past 24 hours that caused you to feel fully alive. Maybe it caused you to feel joy or understood or whole or connected. Just a moment that could be understood as an experience in which you felt close to the divine, and just take a couple of minutes to reflect on that experience and to find a sense of joy in that experience. And then next, I want you to think about an experience that caused you maybe to feel sad or kind of fragmented or frustrated, maybe something that made you feel drained of energy or isolated, something that made you feel like you were less than your best self. And first, take a minute to just release any guilt or shame you might be carrying around that experience, and then release that into the care of God's love. And then I'm going to go ahead and end with a word of prayer over us. And as I do that, I just want us all to look at now the next 24 hours, so the rest of today and into tomorrow, and to look ahead with a heart filled with hope. Maybe find one thing that you can be hopeful for, one thing that gives you hope, And I will go ahead and close us out in prayer while we do that. God, thank you so much for always being near. Thank you that no matter what things look like in our life, no matter what our experiences are, our circumstances are, that we can be fully present and show up exactly as we are, and that we know that you are with us no matter what, that we are so beloved, we are so held by your love. And so I pray that for these next 24 hours, that you would fill our hearts with hope, and that you would help us to feel so held by the love that you give to us that carries us through each day. In your name I pray. Amen. Well, today, and I hope online folks, hopefully you guys can hear us okay. So okay, good. Today we are wrapping up our series on the afterlife. So the past few weeks we've been talking about heaven and hell and all those things, and kind of all the different perspectives on it, different theological understandings about the afterlife. And then today, this was actually Pastor Sabrina's idea for today, and I thought it was so good. She's going to talk to us about, I think especially in America, I know, and in our culture here in America, I don't think we always do a great job kind of through like grief and death and processing loss. And I think and I know even for me personally, like I just have always grown up being so terrified of death. And obviously it's awful. When we lose a loved one, it's terrible and it's so sad and there's so much grief. But I think that there are ways that we can begin to approach it that maybe helps us to maybe let go of some of our fear and anxiety surrounding it and learn how to approach it from a healthier, more whole perspectives. And so today, Pastor Sabrina is going to talk about that, about what that looks like for us. And so, Pastor Sabrina, go ahead and take it away.
So, up here will am I going to be in the camera or?
You will be.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
you're good. I can see you just fine.
Okay. It's different being out here, like speaking to y'all in this setting. Before I jump into the topic, I just want to share, like as Kelly was leading us through that prayer practice, it's kind of amazing like how much can happen in 24 hours. As I was thinking back and all the different little parts that happened in the past day. And the moment that really brought joy and where I experienced God yesterday, I had a couple work events yesterday where we went to a school that was having a Dia de los Muertos celebration. So my eyes still look like I got the dark eyeliner. It was because I had my face all painted. And we made this game with a little monster, and we told the kids, because we do a lot of vaccine clinics. And so we said, okay, this monster, he just got his vaccine. And so you need to put a Band-Aid on one of the monster's arms, but you're going to be blindfolded. And so it's like a pin the tail on the donkey thing. And there was the family and this little kid, he was maybe 4 or 5 and, all dressed up. And so we put the blindfold on and he's like, okay. And he went and he got it right on the arm. And when I took the blindfold off and I said, look, you got it. And he was just like, yes. Oh, awesome. And then his little baby sister went and, she was like way off. And then he was like, oh, you did it. And he gave her a hug. And it was so sweet. And just the pure joy and excitement of something so simple. And not only celebrating that little win, but then also celebrating with his baby sister when she didn't get it, but it was good. It was just, a beautiful moment of joy. So that was what I was thinking of as we went through that. So I get this week to talk about death. And I actually, as I was kind of thinking about it. I think about death a lot. And would it be all right? Can I turn the music off?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. It's
It's a little distracting.
Yeah. when I feel like I've got this, like, I got to talk with the music. So I don't know, Locke sometimes would kind of give me a hard time. I think he understands me better now, but like I enjoy visiting cemeteries. And I have a practice of, I get our local Lockhart newspaper and I always read the obituaries. And that kind of started as something I would do after I worked at a nursing home, because I wanted to know, some of the people that I had worked with, when they had passed away. But then it just sort of became a practice, and I don't know, I enjoy it in a way, but not like, oh, this is fun reading. But I find it so interesting, just the recognition of somebody's life. Even if it was, it was nobody I'd ever met or heard anything about, but they meant something to somebody. And, I love the ones where like, it's like a family member who wrote the piece and they're saying like, oh, she made the best cookies, or, he had the best sense of humor. He would give people a hard time about their politics, or, those little snippets that just share what somebody's life was like. And I think I also find some comfort in reading the obituaries or in visiting the cemetery and just knowing that, like, there's other people who are missing loved ones, who have been through grief, and just recognizing the impact we have on each other in life. But in general, I think our mainstream culture, particularly, want to say like white American culture, does not like to talk about or recognize death. My seminary professor gave an example one time. It was from a TV show. Sorry, I don't know what TV show it was from. But where a couple people were talking, and one person was saying to the other, like, we got to talk about death. Like, everybody's going to die. You're going to die. And he's like, not talking about it is not going to keep you from dying. And then the other person responds, well, now we'll never know, will we? And, I think oftentimes we walk around in kind of this cloud like that, like just imagining, well, if we don't talk about it, it's not going to happen to me, even with, illnesses or aging, there's so much denial around death. And I don't think that talking about it can like magically make it less painful or make the loss any less, but I think it can make it less traumatic. I was a hospice chaplain for a semester or two while I was in seminary. Did an internship with a hospice, and that's one thing I really love about hospice is like for those who are in a way fortunate enough to have, this time of where, like death is coming, to kind of be able to like talk about it and prepare for it and talk with your loved ones about, final wishes and death plans and stuff, and gives the the family time to deal with all of that. But death is still hard and complicated. I mean, I also still, I find myself struggling with like anxious thoughts where, you know, I'll share with y'all because some of you probably have the same things, you know, like Lot goes somewhere and my mind goes to, what if he gets into a car accident? You know, my mom and one of my brothers were visiting this past week, and I was driving us to go eat dinner somewhere, and just kind of out of nowhere, I think, you know, what if we get in a car wreck and all three of us die? Like, how devastating is that going to be to the rest of the family? And it's also, you know, so that I'll say, like, personally, it's also like terrifying in ways and scary. You know, it scares me not only like to think about my own death, because right now I'm really enjoying my life and I want to, you know, there's still things I want to do. And I also worry about, you know, how would my loved ones be if something happened to me. And it's also, of course, scary to think about the loss of loved ones. Even while I was doing that internship with the hospice, part of it, I had to co-lead a grief support group. And it just kind of turned out that the grief support group that they were going to do during that time that I was with them was for spouses who had lost their partner. And that was probably, like, out of any of the support groups I could have been assigned to, that was probably the most challenging for me. Because that, you know, the prospect of losing Locke is just, you know, so scary. And yet, you know, sitting in that support group and like hearing from these people who had lost their partners, and they were all ages, you know, some were, the youngest was probably around 30. Then the oldest, you know, was older, like retired. But it was tough hearing their stories and knowing that, you know, there's nothing that makes me special, that would not happen to me. And anyway, so I don't know. I'm talking to y'all not with any real answers, but just to kind of put it all out there is, I mean, if you live long enough, you're going to lose somebody you care about. And most of you have probably been there and been through that. I don't know. What are some of the thoughts or feelings that come up for you when you think about death?
I think sometimes it seems like so far away or so not real, and then that gets like shattered whenever, like, even if it's not someone you know, but a friend of a friend, or sometimes it can just kind of seem like it's really far off. And you know what I mean? Other times it can feel really close.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it feels like, too, I struggle. It's like either I try to put it out of my mind and not think about it, or if I do think about it, it comes with this like paralyzing fear. And so it's hard. I don't know how to hold, like, I don't quite know how to, like, be aware of our mortality, but also not be paralyzed with fear when I think about it at the same time. Like, I don't know how to do that, because if I, and I've had some very close loved ones die, but I think also I'm like just now through counseling, like learning how to grieve losses that happened like a decade ago, because I just didn't know. It's like I just shut my brain off because it was too much,
Yeah. That's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can definitely identify with both of what y'all said, but yeah, trying to find that balance between death acceptance and recognition and falling into that paralyzing fear.
Right now, I'm kind of dealing with, my grandmother turned 91 on Tuesday, and she was moved into the memory care unit at her assisted living thing. It's been not quite a year, but we're getting there. And she doesn't recognize me anymore. She kind of just is just there. And like every time we go and visit, she's like, "Do I know you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm Erin. I'm your granddaughter." And I just try and talk to her, and she just doesn't really like, "What are you doing? How are you doing?" And she's like, "I'm fine." And it's like she's not interested in talking. And like for like the longest time, like every time my mom calls me, I have this thought, like the first thing that pops through my head, like, "Oh, I wonder if Dee Dee died. Like, is that what she's calling me for?" And it's like this awful feeling, like it's looming, and like it's coming, but you don't know when it's coming. And I don't know, it's almost like she's like hanging out in this like awful state where she like can't take care of herself anymore. She can't do anything, and she like has like almost nothing left of who she was and like the grandmother that I've always known. And it's just like this like almost like a limbo feeling, and that feels awful. It's like to say out loud, but yeah, just hanging out in this weird space.
Mm-hmm.
It is a weird space. That is how it feels.
Yeah. Yeah, and what do you do when you know it's coming, but you don't know when? It's so hard. Yeah. I wanted to share with y'all something I wrote several years ago. This was in, I think, the summer of 2016, when I was kind of going through a death overload, like couldn't deal with life, like trying to, just figure everything out. And so I'm going to share this with y'all. Everywhere I've turned this past week, I've seen death. Over dinner, I talked with a woman whose son died a couple weeks after my mother-in-law, and the 2-year death day is creeping near. A pastor friend and colleague was taken quickly and without any notice that death was on its way. A friend's wife had a miscarriage. An obituary for a woman I used to work with is in the paper. And Facebook suddenly seems full of photos of mothers and grandmas and friends who have gone. And I imagine the ones left behind sharing this from their phone or staring at old pictures scattered around the computer in front of them. And then the horrors of another, even more terrible mass shooting explode upon the news channels and internet. 50 dead. This was at the nightclub shooting in Florida. People went out Saturday night to relax and have fun. Maybe this was the first time some of them had gone to this club. A friend had convinced them to go. Perhaps the bartender has worked there for over a year and knows the regulars. Was wondering if Sam was finally going to talk to that girl she'd been into for weeks. And now that first visitor's in the hospital and Sam's among the dead. So I sat in a quiet corner by the chapel. I sat on the rock by the plaque that honored this little garden space as a legacy of Tiffany Lynn Honeycutt. I don't know who she was, but I know her life was over too early at 23. And I know there's family and friends that grieved and miss her still. I know that she was, and now she's not. And everything I've ever known about life and death is inadequate. A rage begins within me at the brevity of life and the permanence of death. I hope in some form of life after death. I believe in the God of resurrection, after all. But right now, I just know, I know with a factual certainty that I will not see or touch or hear the ones who were caught by death again in this life. And this haunts me. Death surrounds me everywhere I go. The bird with its scruffy feathers by the pond will die. The sweet potato vine will die. The scrawny squirrel and the well-fed squirrel who scramble after each other in circles around the tree will both die. I will die. Everywhere there is life, there is death. Maybe that's the point. The point of what exactly, I'm not quite sure. But there must be something to it if it is everywhere I turn. If it's the recurring theme that edges everyone, the final touch around the picture border, a vignette that is slightly out of focus. But maybe conversely, everywhere there is death, there is life. We make way for those who will come next. For the earth can't sustain us all forever. Our bodies help nourish the earth, feeding the ground, being reborn in the grass and the trees. A wisp of the air that has been in my lungs will one day fill yours. The heart of an organ donor will literally beat in the chest of another. Rabbi Alan Mahler wrote that Torah teaches love doesn't die, people do. People die, and I hate it. It hurts, and it hurts, and it hurts. Yet maybe Tiffany, my mother-in-law, the people who died at that club, and all our other dead are not as far away as they feel. The gifts and stories and love they left behind give sustenance to the ones who live this life still. The shadowed, blurry vignette of death doesn't ruin the picture. It's the perfecting touch that draws the eye toward the beauty of life within. It completes it. And yet, through our interactions with this life, it continues. A journalist for National Geographic spent time on a small Indonesian island where the custom is to keep the body of a dead loved one in the home or nearby for months or even years. They continue talking to them and caring for them. They grieve while yet still keeping them a special part of their lives. The spirit and love of the dead takes root in the living. My father is in here, a man said, referring to the family crypt. But I am here, so he's not really dead. We carry the dead with us. The pain, anger, shame, guilt, fury, and disgust would be all too much if we didn't also have the love that lives on. In creation and in death, God holds us and imbues us with a holy love. And that's where, even still, where those times when death just feels overwhelming, where I can find some sense of peace. I don't know, as Pastor Dan shared all the different theologies about what happens after death and into eternity, and the past few weeks talking about heaven and hell and what comes after this, I don't know. I grew up in a church that had it all lined out, very clear-cut answer to everything. But that never helped. I don't know. That helps some people deal with that, but it just was never satisfying to me, and I just don't know what comes after this. But I know that in all things, in life and in death, we belong to God, and that God holds us. And that's what gives me peace. So when I find those times where I'm like being paralyzed by fear or it's just too much, I try to stop myself and to say, okay, this is what I'm scared of. And I'm going to let that go and just trust whatever happens, I'm in God's care. And, that doesn't give an answer for anything. It doesn't say death is not going to happen, or calm down, it's okay. But it's like, when you comfort a child in a storm, or I think about even the story of Jesus coming to the disciples when they're in the middle of a storm on the sea, and Jesus tells them, it's okay, like you don't have to fear. And he doesn't say it's not going to happen again. He doesn't say, the storm's not going to come again. You don't tell the kid, like, there's never going to be another thunderstorm. You're not going to get hurt ever again. But it's okay because I'm here with you. And I think that's where I find peace. I don't know, what do y'all find helpful or comforting? And Kelly, you can see if, let me know if there's any comments from the, I don't want to forget about y'all.
I don't know, I'm more in Kelly's boat where she used to be right now, where I'm just like, nope, don't think about it. We don't have time to do that right now. We don't have time to process that. Like,
I put this in the chat, but there's this quote that actually has helped me a little bit in my grieving process. Not so much like, I'm still like thinking about, I'm working on that. That's still really hard for me to do, but I think when it comes to like facing into those I love that have already died, that I'm trying to grieve. But did anybody watch the show WandaVision, the Marvel show WandaVision? But there's this one episode, he's like, yeah. There's this episode where Wanda and Vision are talking, and she's talking about the loss of her brother and how she's just overcome with grief and doesn't know how to move on. And he looks at her and he said, gosh. He just says, what is grief but love persevering? And I was like, ooh, that just like, it helped to give me I feel like a more peaceful kind of attitude around grieving loss that I already experienced, of like, well, of course, yeah, it hurts really bad, but it's because there was so much love there.
Yeah.
And so it helps me to then still like feel the loss and feel the sadness of it, but to also, I think, be really grateful that my relationship with those people was so awesome, and that we loved each other so much that that's why it hurt so bad. So it made me
be able to hold those two things together, you know, where it's like, yeah, the loss is so devastating, but it's only because when they were alive, look how much love there was between us and what we got to experience. I think of my grandmother. She died about 12, 13 years ago. Particularly with her, you know, it's like that's probably been one of the hardest losses I've ever had to walk through. But like thinking of that, of like, well, of course I'm so devastated because we were so close. And then I think of all the things she did for me and the relationship we had, and that actually helps to usher in a little bit of peace in the middle of the grief, you know? Yeah, so.
Yeah, and we have so many, we collectively as like a culture here have so many kind of ideas and rules we put on ourselves, on each other about grief and like how long you should grieve and when you should be over it. And the fact is that grief is ongoing, you know, it goes in cycles. You know, you've probably heard of the, I forget how many phases of grief, you know, denial and anger and da-da-da. But it's not a 1, 2, 3 step process. Like you might be in denial at one time and then, okay, the next day, like you're feeling better about it. And then the next year, something sparks your anger, you know, you see something or you go somewhere and you're like, man, I wish my person was here with me. And it's just, yeah, it's ongoing. And it's okay to be dealing with grief at different times. And,
one thing that has helped me is, it's funny, a couple years back, Icon did a series on Enneagram. And through that, I learned about the musical group or musical act, Sleeping at Last. And they have a series about the planets, and one of the more popular ones is Saturn, which, in a sense, you know, Saturn is the Greek god, the Roman god of death. And but in that song, there's a line that covers about how much of a miracle it is just to exist. And as a part, and I kind of, my dad died about 12 years ago, and I've always had an issue with, I mean, you know, grieving. And so I have repeatedly gone back to think about it and process it. And each time, even before I found this song, it was just, I was still left up with that unfinished, unaccomplished, uncompleted sense of acceptance. And then after I heard that song, and then I kind of processed those lyrics about how much of the miracle is just exists in the first place. And it made me more grateful, more the time with my dad that was growing up, just for that. And if you haven't heard it, it's a beautiful song, both musically and lyrically. It's called Saturn. It's by Sleeping at Last. But yeah, it's just that line. Really helped me revisit the entire approach to how I grieved my father, and I'm much more comfortable accepting with it after processing it, knowing those songs, knowing this.
that's great.
Janine said too, she said, I think for me, we get so wrapped up in death and dying, the biggest crime would be for me to spend so much time agonizing over it that I miss the here and now and how grateful I am to be here now for my friends and family.
Yeah, there's definitely an aspect of it that makes you aware and grateful. I think you mentioned, you know, being grateful, you know, for being alive. There's a couple resources I recommend y'all check out. One is a podcast called Terrible. Thanks for asking. And the host is, her name's Sarah McInerney. I have no idea how to spell that.
I think I've heard her on another podcast before, but yeah.
She's incredible. She's funny. And the podcast is not as depressing as it sounds. but she, fairly young, her husband died from cancer shortly after her dad had passed away. And so she has had her fair share of grief and death and loss. But in the show, she'll bring people on, and it deals with not only death, loss, but other forms of loss and grief. And she brings humor into it, and I don't know, I just find it really good. And she talks about her husband, like she's remarried now, but she still talks about her husband who passed away, and she'll kind of joke and be like, you know, I have two husbands, my husband who's no longer here and my husband that I have now, because, you know, she loved her husband who's died, and now that she's remarried doesn't make that any less, which I think is just a beautiful model of how, you know, we continue loving those who are no longer here and can love others too. Another resource, Caitlin Doty, I think is how you say her last name. She's on YouTube, has a YouTube channel called Ask a Mortician. And she also has 3 or 4 books. But she is a mortician. But she talks to everything death, different burial practices. I read her books, The Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, which is about her experience working in a crematory, that she would cremate bodies. And she also, like, I think you have to develop a sense of humor when you're talking about this stuff so much. And she's hilarious. But definitely I would recommend checking her out. And she has a website with a bunch of helpful resources. So I think when we're also talking about this stuff, most of us, you know, don't like to talk about this stuff, and so we haven't done any planning or preparing. And so then when a sudden illness or death happens, you're dealing with a financial crisis or a crisis of like not knowing what would that person want in terms of like extended care. And so she has a lot of resources on her website to do like advanced planning and how to talk with loved ones about, you know, what you would want, or to find out what they would want. And I think that's all really important. Also, because it pains me when I see those little like donation jars for somebody like trying to raise money to cover burial expenses. So whatever, you know, future planning we can do, even though it's not the most fun conversation to have. But yeah, any other thoughts or comments or testimonies? I'm curious, I don't want to put you on the spot, our young fellow here. What's your name? Samuel. I mean, you sat through this. This is a big conversation. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking that someone close to you that has died is probably really harsh.
Yeah, it can be real sad for a while. Do you have any questions? I might not have the answer, but sometimes it's good to just ask the questions. And you can see how even us grown-ups, we don't know it all. Well, yeah, I guess to close out such a, kind of heavy topic here, just hope you can go with the peace, knowing that in all things in life and in death, God, the eternal love, the divine, whatever your concept of God is, there's something greater that holds us and survives, is beyond our individual existence. I hope that you can find peace and comfort in that. I'll end with a prayer. Bless you. And how about before closing out with a prayer, if there's any, it's kind of a recognition of like this, and then also with Dia de los Muertos, like one of the things I love about that practice is just having a communal place to like, again, say like, hey, I lost this person, and recognize that loss. So if there's anybody whose name you want to lift up, yeah. So
My grandmother, her name was Carrie, and then my dad, his name was Wesley. And my cousin, his name was Luke.
Luck's mom, my mother-in-law, close to her also. Yeah, I think this time of year with the holidays coming up, it gets hard. I always think about her at this time of year. We would binge watch those cheesy Hallmark movies. We're lifting up, I don't know if you heard, I'm going to say a prayer, but just if there's any loved ones that you've lost.
Absolutely. My dad, Joseph, and my father-in-law, David.
For God of all creation, of all life, and over all death, who is in all things and of all things, whose breath gives us life, be with us, fill us with your spirit, that even at the times when we are grieving, when we are missing those who are no longer here with us physically, that you would comfort us, give us strength, give us peace, surround us with a community that will hold us through those difficult times, whether it's in the days leading up to a loss, the days following, or in the years to come. When those memories and that love is still within us, may we trust in you that even when the storm comes, when we know that storms will come, that we can find shelter in you. We thank you for the life that we have and for our loved ones who are with us. May we just find joy and love in the moments that we share, and not take for granted the times that we have together. We thank you that even though we don't know exactly what comes after this life and what is beyond this, that you are a God of resurrection. And that though there may be death all around us, you bring forth new life even out of death. We pray this in your holy name. Amen. Kelly, you have any closing?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It's good. So thanks for being here, everybody. Have a good week.
The after music.
Yeah,
Samuel, what are you drawing there? I like that. That's cool. I love those crystal crowns. I have some too. Kelly, how do we reset this?
Okay. Some of these chairs, John.